December 10th, 2022. December 10th, 2022. It's a Saturday. This is Dennis John Sietsma Productions. Today's video log is about my MerCruiser 3.7 liter engine. And I ran it recently and discovered I have a coolant leak, but it takes like overnight to lose the coolant. So I have to ferret out where the coolant's going. Number one, I want to make sure it's not going into the engine and sitting in the cylinders. So I'm going to pull all 4 spark plugs and rotate the engine and check to see if I see any coolant squirting out of the cylinders, and then I'll do compression and leak down tests with the cylinders out, spark plugs out, I should say, spark plugs. And to my audience, I hope you are enjoying the video, and thank you for watching. December 10th, Saturday, December 10th, 2022. 3.7 liter MerCruiser, troubleshooting coolant loss. This engine is mine. I've owned it since it was new in 1989. It's been rebuilt once by a local rebuilder a few years ago. Doesn't have too many hours on it since the rebuild. In this segment, which is number 2, unless I'm mistaken, we're going to start with the basics, which I've removed all the spark plugs, because if the coolant that's being lost, and it takes it about a day to empty the seawater elbow of coolant, if it's going into the engine due to a cracked head or failed head gasket, that's very bad. That could lead to hydrostatic lock that can bend rods, and bent rods can lead to lower end problems and rod knock. And this engine, if well maintained according to the service manual and all the service bulletins, can give really good service. I know because I've owned this one. Now, unfortunately, a lot of the service bulletins weren't released to the public. They were given to the dealers in the years before the internet, and all of them are posted now on the internet to my Facebook group, 3.7 liter MerCruiser, which I'm the administrator and founder. And but I got all the plugs out. Now, there are several references that I can give you for spark plugs in the service manual, which is, I call it the SB or SM service manual, and service bulletins like this one in the section of the service manual next to the Prestolite distributor, where, like I say, there's several recommended here, but I like NGK BR6 Frank Sierra. That's Bravo Romeo 6 Foxtrot Sierra. There's also a Champion reference and an AC Delco reference. And of course there's a MerCruiser number, but they've been all over the place, MerCruiser has. Now, this engine has forward pistons and a forward head and forward rods. And I forget, they're from a V8 truck engine. I think it was the 460, but I could be mistaken. People forgive me if I misspeak. But anyway, the main problem with people working on this engine is they don't respect the fact that it's an aluminum block, open deck, that's relatively soft compared to the head, which is steel. And this engine has an aluminum exhaust manifold with a steel seawater elbow, so you've got the similar metals. Now, to address this, they have entire sections in the service manual, but they did put out service bulletins, 80-6, 81-30, 81-35, 82-3, 82-5, 83-11, and 93-17. That's a lot of reading. And most of the time it's because the gasket fails between the seawater elbow, or the seawater elbow is rusted out. Now the years of service you can expect from a seawater elbow is limited by the manufacturer, which used to be Osco Marine and Bar. I think may have stopped production, I don't know. But now these are made by an overseas manufacturer, and I don't know who's making it. But the service life in general is thought to be 5 years. If this rusts out, you will definitely get hydrostatic lock. Now if you don't recognize this in time, it will damage your starter by breaking the nose off the starter and probably bending a rod. So I recommend you change the gasket at least and keep the 4 bolts torqued according to the service bulletin as often as you can, and check the water shutter while you're in there replacing the gasket. I recommend annual replacement of the gasket. It's a crushable gasket because from my experience you have corrosion that builds up and destroys your very expensive aluminum exhaust manifold, which I was lucky. I got a local artisan to repair one, and in the future he refused, the same artisan, because it's required some risky machine work. Risky being it could destroy it, not fix it. But he fixed it the first time, and after that he refused to do any more because he had moved on to doing different kind of work. But the first thing you want to do is pull the spark plugs and rotate by hand the alternator rotor, which is this big thing I'm looking at here. MerCruiser calls that an alternator rotor in their service literature. Now the coolant could also be escaping through this little hose that goes who knows where, but that could be one place where it's going. It also could be going to the coolant recovery bottle down there if there's a problem. So we want to do some diagnostics. We first want to rotate the engine by hand and see if water comes out of the cylinders. And I can't hold the camera and turn it, so I can't do that at the same time. I don't recommend using the starter, because if you do have a problem with the pistons being frozen because coolant was in there and arrested, you're going to do more damage. So that's why I say do it by hand as opposed to cranking it. So I'm going to stop the camera and rotate it through by hand first. Besides that, we can do compression tests, and we can do leak down tests, and we're going to do combustion gas in the coolant test. We're going to do all of those tests on this video. And at the end of the video, I'll read this article I wrote, which is a summary of the history of the leaks on this engine and what I think somebody should do to address it for their engine. And this is opinion, not official MerCruiser, and I'm not a marine professional, so take it with a grain of salt. And this is not a how-to, this is a video log. So there may be other ways of doing it, but this is the way I do it. So I'll pause the camera for a minute and I'll rotate it through by hand. We'll see if I see any coolant coming out of the cylinders, and that would be a clue. Number one is, do I have coolant in the cylinders when turning it through by hand? Okay, on this engine I see no coolant when I turned it through by hand, so that's the good news. The next test I'll do will be compression and leak down tests. Now these are supposed to be done for best results with the engine at the normal operating temperature, and I don't want to waste the coolant, so I'm going to do it at regular, because I normally do the tests at regular temperature first, and if I see anything suspicious then I move on to warming the engine and doing one spark plug at a time and trying to discern if we have a leak with any particular cylinder. And I need to say a bit more about the spark plug thing. Beware not to get the wrong plug. This is a BR6ES, which is for power equipment, and this is very cold. And because the one recommended in the service literature, the service manual, is BPR6FS, which I like NGK plugs, but this is also running pretty cold. Not exactly what I want to see. So you may want to try different plugs with your engine to get the best optimum result from the reference materials that are already posted to the internet, to the Facebook group. And of course, I've mentioned some of them in the cooling section, and in the future I'll do something about spark plugs. But spark plugs is something people want to fight about and argue about, and I don't have the time to fight or argue. Use whatever you want on your boat and we'll see how it comes out. But for my boat, this is a video log, and I use the NGK. And make sure you don't get the wrong plug. There's a big difference between the EFS and the FS. Whatever I said a minute ago, I can't even read it yet. BPR6FS, Foxtrot Sierra, is what I want to use on my boat. And of course, you should have the proper tools. I like these spark plug tools with the little piece of foam inside so you don't break the plug. And you're going to need a wrench. Now, some of them take one kind of wrench to fit, and this is like 7/8 on, or no, this one is, what size is this one? Anyway, you match the wrench up to the to get the plug on and off. You match it. Okay, this one is 13/16, and the other one that is also a 5/8 inch. 5/8 inch is the plug size, but this one for some reason takes a 3/4 inch, or no, not 3/4. It takes 7/8. Let's see, 7/8? No, 3/4. It was 3/4. Anyway, you get the idea. But you're going to need wrenches because there's not enough room in there. So these are the tools you'd use to get the spark plugs out and back in again. And I'm trying to think anything else I want to say here at this point before we move on to the compression test. And what I'm concerned about is either a blown head gasket or a cracked head. And in the past I've had to get another head, and they crack around in the exhaust valve recess area, and I got one from Clearwater Head Exchange in St. Petersburg, Florida. Real nice business there. Gave me a good price, and they buy new heads and they marinize them for they modify them by adding this cooling thing in the front, cooling port, for use with the 3.7 liter MerCruiser with all the different names, the MCM 470, etc. So at least I don't have coolant in the cylinders, so that's good news, because since there's no coolant in the cylinders, I probably don't have a problem with hydrostatic lock. Well, if it's not going in the cylinders, where is the coolant going? That's what we got to ferret out. I suspect this seawater elbow is rusted out, and it's going out with the cooling water. This is a close cooled system. So anyway, this is the process. Is you start simple with the plugs out and turn it through by hand, and then you go on to other diagnostic tests, and we'll talk more about there in future segments. But I hope you're enjoying my video. This is Dennis Sietsma in Homestead, Florida, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you, audience, for watching. December 10th, 2022, segment number 4. This is Dennis Sietsma Video Productions. Okay, good news. Cranking the engine with the starter, no coolant water, no coolant was observed from the cylinder with the plugs out. As to the compression test, the good news is all 4 of them were around 175, 180, with number 4 being the slowest one to come up. And of course a compression test is hook up the gauge and you crank it over 2 or 3 times, and this is cold. Hot, it might even test better, but it came up to 170 this time. The thing about a compression test is not the number. You want it more than 90, but you want it to be equal so you have a smooth idle. So we're done with the compression test. And yes, I'm near an airport, but when I said turn it through by hand, I meant with a tool, with a tool to, you know, put, this is a, oh, what is it? It's a 3/4 inch bolt on the end of the alternator rotor. Now, the other place the coolant could go, there are seals that like to leak on the end of the camshaft extension. There's 2 seals, an inner and an outer. Usually it's the outer one that fails, and there's a weep hole, a relief hole, that if the seal fails, that coolant drips down into the bilge. So you look for that. Now, the service manual says if you see that, don't panic, because removing and reinstalling this alternator rotor is a pain in some situations. You see on this, it would be a pain because I am so close. I don't have any room here so I have to remove the drive and use bottle jacks. I have to loosen the rear mounts and lift the front of the engine up to give me enough room to get the tools in here to remove the rotor without pulling the engine completely out and then replacing those seals. Now, I know the history of this engine, and on this engine I've replaced the camshaft a few times when they weren't that expensive. Now they're very expensive. And repaired this last time I did it using speedy sleeves or easy sleeves made by a company called SKF. It used to be Federal Mongol with a MerCruiser part number for those but most machine shop knows about them. They recondition the surface area of what's mating with the seal, so you don't have to replace the camshaft. You can put those speedy sleeves or easy sleeves on the end of the camshaft. But I haven't ever had one fail after that was done, because that increases the diameter that's pressing against the seal. And in future, I wish we could come up with a better way. But what the service manual says is, it says don't panic. If coolant's leaking, don't use coolant. Use fresh water mixed with anti-corrosive substance compound. You can buy at an auto or marine supply or online. A rust preventative mixed with fresh water instead of coolant. And they say that because it's a little bit thicker mixture and may not leak through the seals like the coolant does. And the third recommendation is from my book. I say put a few more hours on it and keep an eye on the coolant loss, and hopefully you know, you don't actually have wear. You haven't been using the boat enough and or put enough hours on it. Like this one, I had the engine rebuilt professionally, locally, and I uninstalled it and reinstalled it, and the machine shop did the rest. And they had to do it twice because the first time it developed rod knock. And that's a problem with this, is people don't pay attention to the service bulletins. They just throw the head on. If they have a problem with the head or the head gasket, they throw it on and they torque it down any way they seem fit instead of following the service bulletin. It gives you a specific torque sequence and pattern. And I go way beyond what the bulletin says. And my engine, I install it cold. I torque it according to the service bulletin and in the sequence if I'm replacing the head or the head gasket. And then I warm the engine, and then I torque it again with the engine warm. And then by warm I mean normal operating temperature. And then after that I put 20 hours on it according to the service manual, like it was a new engine, the break-in period, 20 hours. I don't go too many RPM. I don't keep one constant speed. I use the break-in oil recommended in the service bulletins for break-in. I do everything like this is a new engine. Then after 20 hours I do the torque again. It's a lot more work, but it gives me, I don't have failures of the head gasket that way, or the head can always fail, you know, depending on the manufacturing of it. But anyway, I think I beat that horse to death, both online and here, that you have to, when you replace the head or head gasket, you have to follow the service bulletin and be very careful about it, because you can, what happens is if you don't do it, the head will make the block flex. Well, the block moves and the crankshaft is solid steel. It can't move. So you burn out piston rod bearings and crankshaft bearings, or both, and you get rod knock. And you say, oh, how did this happen? And it doesn't happen initially. And the other big thing that causes rod knock is, like I told you, coolant loss and into the cylinder somehow, either through the seawater elbow failing a certain way, or not keeping those 4 bolts torqued. You can read all about it in the service manuals, and all of those are posted online now, including the service bulletins. So ignorance is not bliss when it comes to maintaining this engine. In the next segment, we're going to move on to doing a leak down test using an air compressor. And I only recently bought a leak down tester, and I like it. It's a nice procedure. I went through this van and checked all 6 cylinders, or not all 6, but you know, I did both compression and leak down. I like the leak down tester. It's a good test. But again, you're supposed to do these tests with engine at the normal operating temperature, and I know that's a pain in the neck. It's not easy, because you got to warm the engine, then deal with hot parts to get the one plug out at a time. So plan accordingly and try to do it according to Hoyle. And that's an old joke. Hoyle, I think, had the rules for gambling or cards or whatever. So it's an old saying, according to Hoyle. Hoyle, who's Hoyle? Who is John Galt? You got to read Atlas Shrugged to appreciate who is John Galt. Anyway, audience, thank you for watching my video. In the next segment, we'll move on to the leak down test. This is segment number 10, or excuse me, segment 5. Segment 5, this is December 10th, 2022, Saturday, December 10th, 2022. This is segment number 5, engine leak down test for the 3.7 liter MerCruiser 4-cylinder engine. Now, the instructions say to put 100 psi on this side, and with nothing connected, adjust the knob to get it to come up to the set level. And of course, we're way beyond that. Stand by while I adjust it. Okay, with 100 psi here, you slowly adjust it to come up to 0, and it's a little funky. It likes to go up or down. Then connect it to your cylinder, and before that you have to get the cylinder positioned, the crankshaft, so both valves are open, and with the cylinder connected, it should be either at the set level or the green or the, this is perfect. There's absolutely no loss there on that cylinder. That's number 4. So this is a good test, and that's one of the reasons why people like the, and there's different ones, and this one I can't remember who made it, otherwise I'd give you a video review, but the instructions are in it. Let's see if the name of it is on the instructions. Who made it? Probably not. Who made you? Anyway, I bought it online. Whoever made it, they should have put it on the box, otherwise I'd give them a thumbs up for this particular one. Anyway, I'm going to pause the camera and we'll do the other cylinders. Hang on. Okay, this cylinder number 3, and it's also no loss at all. I was lucky. I didn't have to play with the crankshaft. 3 and 4 happened to be closed at the same time. Now the reason I didn't worry about my timing sequence or anything is because I know the timing sequence. It's right here on the manifold, 1342, which is pretty standard for a 4-cylinder engine, and I'll tell you a story about that one day. But anyway, 1342, and I know the distributor goes clockwise, and I mark the number 1 wire, so when I put these wires back on, I know it's 1 3 4 2, or yeah, 1 3 4 2, yeah, 1 3 4 2. And it's kind of fun if you take a compressed nozzle and you go in sequence, you can actually make the motor run going from, if you're bored and have nothing better to do. So this is good. 2 out of 4. Pause the camera, we'll go on to number 2. Okay, cylinder number 2, also holding pressure. Absolutely 0 loss. It's perfect. Again, this engine hasn't got too many hours on it since the last rebuild. And I do oil changes all the time on this thing, even though I haven't had it on the water in like 2 years. I haven't had a tow vehicle that could get me to the water, so anybody who wants to help me out, I'm south of Miami. Just trying to get it 10 miles to the water. And yeah, and it could get a tow truck and all that, but I just don't have any time, unfortunately. Anyway, let's go to number 1 next. Okay, also number 1, no problem. Perfect, perfect. All 4 cylinders, perfect readings for the leak down test. I think it's kind of odd I happened to stop the engine with all the valves closed, but I'll take it. The next test, we're going to move on to the next test, which will be to put the spark plugs back in, get it running, and do a combustion gas test and see if we have any combustion gas, which, you know, we've done the leak down test and compression. It would really surprise me if I failed the combustion gas leak test, but anything is possible, which is why you do diagnostics before you tear an engine apart. And I'm always harping on social media about doing diagnostics, and people are sick of hearing it, but these are the diagnostics, people, and they save you a lot of time and parts, and you know, it's nice to make sure that you need to do this work, because it just takes so many man hours to take it apart, and it takes even longer to put it back together again correctly. So this is Dennis John Sietsma Productions, Homestead, Florida, south of Miami, north of Key Largo, southeast Florida, USA. Thank you, audience, for watching. I hope you enjoy my video. Thanks for watching. This is Saturday, December 10th, 2022. Saturday, December 10th, 2022. This is segment 10 of the 3.7 liter MerCruiser engine coolant diagnostics. Audience, I made a terrible error in segments 6, 7, 8, and 9. Did anybody notice? Did anybody notice that I was using the wrong hose? I was using the hose from the connector to the cylinder from the compression tester, which has a check valve in it. So of course you'd have perfect reading. So I have to redo the test. Now when I pressurize a cylinder, the crankshaft was on the compression stroke almost to TDC, so the air pressure is fighting me, and even with that I had an acceptable reading. But for grins and whatever, I'll show you what I did. With the cylinder not connected, you connect the gauge and you run up the pressure until, oh, it's already pegged out. Hang on, reduce the pressure. Okay, alright. Until we get to the set mark. Go clockwise until you hit set. And then you can connect it and see what the reading is. Excuse the camera work, it's terrible. Let me pause it for a minute. Okay, with cylinder number 1, both valves closed, and manually by hand turning the crank shaft through until you hear the valves close and the pressure come up. And you could actually hear it when you crank it through. You hear it hiss through the exhaust and then intake manifold or whatever. We've got a leak down reading that's in the green, and I don't care, I'll take it. I have to repeat this test for all 4 before I say it's good. But when we move on to the combustion test, combustion leak detector, I got this at Harbor Freight, and excuse the noise. Hang on, I'm going to turn that off. Anyway, let me start over again with the leak down test. What I failed to mention, the other test in compression is if you had a problem with the compression test, the next step would be to do the same test again with the engine at normal operating temperature, and put 30 cc's of Marvel Mystery Oil into each cylinder one at a time with the engine warm, and see if the compression test improves to determine if it's rings or valve. And the way you determine 30 cc's is with this horse medicine syringe. So this is one of your diagnostic tools. You're going to get at any feed store for horses or ranches or ranch supply, what have you, a horse syringe. The other good diagnostic tool is a turkey baster. If you have to do any pressure or suction tests, like if you were checking if you could get fuel with the anti-siphon valve removed, to check your engine pickup tube, your fuel tank pickup tube with a turkey baster, or check at your filter if you can suck fuel. Disconnect the inlet side, intake side of the filter, and use a turkey baster. And if you can't suck fuel that way, you got a problem that you have to ferret out. Why you can't get fuel at the fuel filter. Forget about the fuel pump and all that stuff. Just use a turkey baster. But Marvel Mystery Oil is a good tool. You can put it in your gas if you want to lubricate your valves. If the engine hasn't been running in a while, you can add it a little bit to the oil. Follow the directions, call the company. But here's the test fluid you have to get with this combustion gas test, and we won't move on to that until we finish with the leak down test. But you have to listen with the cylinder connected. Right now we got around, you listen to it, and I'm going to set the camera down. You can hear it as I rotate it by hand. You can hear the valves open and close and the gas leaking. Okay, right now I've got like no leak at all with it at this position. And okay, now we've got a lot of leak. You can hear it hissing as the valves open and close. Now that was the power stroke we just hit. I can feel it at the flywheel. Gotta get a good bite on this thing with a wrench and try to turn it. A lot harder with the plugs in. And turn it through by hand until you hear the hiss goes away. That means all your valves are closed. Ouch. I keep slipping off this bolt. I need a better ratchet. Anyway, this is a 3/4 inch. But I turn it to set and to let the gas in and out, so I can set this set point. It kind of helps so you can do that and bring it up to set, and that's on the input. And you disconnect that, you go to the cylinder. Sorry for the bad camera work, but I can't hold the camera and do this at the same time. You hook it up the cylinder, and I got at least 40%. So that's a good cylinder. Now if you had a cracked head or a bad head gasket, you couldn't get that result. You'd be a lot worse. And I'm trying to crank it through by hand to see if I can get less leakage. Okay, you can hear that when a valve opens. And Sounds like that's intake, which I'd expect next after combustion would be, or exhaust would be after that. Oh, I'm feeling compression. Feeling something. Alright, so I'm going to leave it there for a minute and do the test again. I'm going to set it to 0. Oh, this is a lot of fiddling around, but this is a very good test, I think. Okay, and set it to 0. Hook it back up to the cylinder, and it's at least 40%, which is in the good. Now I'm going to do this 3 or 4 times off camera for cylinder 1, see if I can get any better. Thanks for your patience. Sorry about the bad camera work. Okay, I'm still in cylinder number 1, and the reading is excellent right before top dead center on the compression stroke. If as I'm cranking it through, I can feel the air pressure fighting against me. So I just leave the crankshaft there at the best reading I could get without it pushing me back the other way from the air pressure. And then I do the setting, and the reading is about 25%, which is still in the green. Now I got to do this to the other 3. This is kind of fun, really, because if you got a bad head gasket or a bad valve, a stuck valve, or a crack in the cylinder head, I think it'll appear with this leak down test, which is why everybody likes it. I see on social media compression test is okay, but they really like leak down test. Of course, you need both, really, to tell what's going on with an engine cylinder. So this is nothing exotic or strange or weird, just something you can do to test an engine as a diagnostic. And I got a new plug to put in, 35 thousandths of an inch gap, the NGK BPR6FS, and not to be confused with the other, but I'm going to try swapping different plugs out, I guess, and see if I can make it run better. The book has several recommended, so goodness knows, every time anybody brings up spark plugs, I just post those on the internet saying, hey, this is what the book says. Don't argue with me. This is what the book says. You pick the one you like. Anyway, hope you're enjoying the video. Thank you for watching. This is December 10th, 2022. It's a Saturday afternoon. This is cylinder number 2, leak down test, and it's excellent. I get a better reading, I notice, when I stop on the compression stroke, when the rings are sealing, on the compression before the power stroke. I can't hold it on the power because of the air pressure, but you can see that it's holding pressure quite nicely. If there was any leaking at all, you'd see the needle going down there. And that's pretty evident when you disconnect the cylinder here. You can hear it go whoosh. Okay, so this is the diagnostic, and this is the advantage of doing diagnostics with a fully assembled or partially assembled engine, is you can do the tests and redo the tests if there's any question in your mind. Because I made a mistake earlier in segments 6 through 9, and I forget what segment this is, but anyway, we will carry on to cylinder number 3, leak down test. This gizmo works pretty well on cylinders 2 and 3. 4 I can't get back there with it, but I like these extensions with the knurling on there, so you can, but I always use Never Sees compound as much as I can on things that might get stuck. Never Sees from Napa and or others, Permatex Corporation, and I start the plugs by hand so I don't cross thread them, and then I use one of these sockets, and then I do the final tightening. however I can. That makes sense. We're moving on to cylinder number 3 next. Okay, number 3's in the green, and I can hear the intake valve opening through the carburetor as I approach the compression stroke. After the intake closes, then the next part is the, and you can see the reading going up for some reason. I don't know why. But, But if there's any problem with a head gasket, that would be going down, not up. Or a cracked head. So the next check is the after number 4 is done, and we'll do number 4 next. Next check would be the checking for combustion gases in the coolant, which you can do with a closed cooling system like this one. After that, I pull the exhaust elbow and put on my spare. I have a spare seawater elbow. Whenever I replace these, I keep if it's used but good, I keep the old one as a spare and keep it on the shelf for testing like this. So we'll move on to the next cylinder, to number 4. So far 1 through 3's been good. I can't do this on camera because I can't hold the camera and do the but when I hold it against the air pressure on the compression stroke, the reading really gets good. I mean, I don't hear I don't see any leakage whatsoever. So if I had a cracked head or a bad head gasket, it would show up like a sore thumb. So this is a good test. Now, besides replacing the seawater elbow, which I'm not going to do because I got a spare but I don't have the gasket, and I like to put a new gasket on it every time I could do it without that, but I'll probably put on my used but good one till I can get a new one shipped in, but assuming I can find one. But the other test would be a coolant pressure test, and I don't have that tester, so I'd either have to rent it or buy it, and I could do either one. I got a Harbor Freight store here in Florida City at the end of the Florida Turnpike at exit 0, give or take a mile or 2. So I'm real happy so far because I did not want to have to change a head gasket or replace a head for this loss of coolant, and I'm sure I can keep going until I find out what the cause is. But again, this is December 10th, 2022, Homestead, Florida, USA, south of Miami, north of Key Largo, Florida City. Dennis John Seatsma Productions, and thank you for watching. Okay, we're working on number 4 now. Taking me a little more time with the last one. It's a little harder to get to. Saturday, December 10th, 2022. Saturday, December 10th. I'm on cylinder number 4, a leak down test, and this one's the best one so far. But I think I'm getting the hang of it, is rotate the crank until we're on the compression stroke and then run it up for the best reading. And then double check it, leaving the crankshaft where it is, do the set, and then check the pressure and see what percentage it is. I don't hear any leak at all on any of these cylinders, so I'm sure it's not a cracked head or a bad head gasket. I'm pretty sure. So I'll get this running pretty soon, and I'd like to do a coolant system pressure test and a coolant system leak down test, and see what not leak down, coolant system pressure test excuse me, I can't talk, combustion gas test in the coolant. So getting excited here, too excited. But anyway, hope you're enjoying the video. I hope this information has some benefit. I'm sorry I'm so long-winded, but I have a lot to say, a lot on my mind, and I'd like to cover all the talking points, because a lot of people are new to these older engines and how to do the basic. These are basic tests that I'm showing you. These are the ABCs, not the scanners and all this other really advanced stuff. I love scanners and all those tools, but you know, those are very high-end stuff that only the professionals have, and it would be nice to be able to ferret out this stuff without having to rely on all those shops. Nice to be able to look into things yourself and at least know if the basics are good. So we will carry on. This is probably it for today, except to run the engine maybe, and I'm not sure if I'm going to use coolant or I'll use water, or I may just wait till tomorrow, or wait till I can get the gasket and swap out that. I don't know what I want to do next. I kind of thought I'd find something before this, but I was hoping I wouldn't. So this is all good news so far, and thanks for watching. Appreciate you watching.